So take your two card pieces, which I think are piece I, and fold them in half. You think you may have already done that from when you interfaced it, but they should be folded in half, wrong sides together. And then you want to do the same with pieces K. So you should have two pieces K, and that's they're cut from lining. Give them a press. And then you want to do the same again. So you want to press those wrong sides together, raw edges matching, press those in half lengthways. So eventually we will have 1, 2, 3, 4 pockets all sat in a row. And the construction will be very similar to what we've just done. So take one of your piece Ks and open it up flat. And then take your pen and your ruler and draw a line 1.5 centimetres up from the bottom edge. Make sure that you're nice and parallel. Then you want to take one of your card pocket pieces and decide which one's going to sit at the back. There's not much in it, they look both the same to me. And I want to put that, lining it up so that the raw edge matches up with that line there. Pin that in place, and then we're just going to stitch 1 centimetre up from the bottom edge there. So once again I shall just match up my edge of my presser foot with the edge of my my raw edge of my pocket fabric, and actually that gives you less than a centimetre, but it works out well. I'm going to do a back stitch. There we go, that's sewn down. And you can probably guess what comes next. We take our second card pocket piece and line that up so that the raw edges at the bottom all meet and match. And then we're just going to sew, in fact do it that way, just going to sew along the bottom edge there. And once again I'll line up those raw edges at the bottom with the edge of my presser foot. And you want to now draw the lines up just as you did before, but this time we're going to divide the 2 layered panels into 6 pockets. So draw a line along there and one up here as well. Just flip that over so I could see it a bit more clearly. Just want to make sure that those lines are really at right angles as well. So now I want to stitch along here and along here, and these pockets look bigger. That's because we've allowed for the binding at either side, so you'll end up with 3, or rather 6 evenly sized pockets. I'll just stop at the top of that pink pocket there, do a back stitch. Same on the other side. And that's my card panel divided into 6 sections. Once again, as you go, just check that everything fits. We're now going to attach this to one of our zip pocket panels. This is panel H. You've got 2 of them. So just take one of them and you want to lay that in front of you right sides up. And we're going to follow the same technique as we've done before. So what we'll do, just like before, is we'll draw a line 1.5 centimetres up from that raw edge, lay what will be the bottommost pocket down on there like that, sew that down, then we fold this one over, layer that on top matching the raw edges, and then we sew round the edge to secure them all. So you end up with 2, 4, 6 card pockets and 1, 2 sort of either document or boarding pass pockets. And then behind that, this will now be the front of your zip pocket. So eventually your zip sits like that, and that's how it all layers up. So let's do that now. So the first thing to do is to draw your line 1.5 centimetres up from the bottom edge there. Then I'll take the pocket that I want to sit behind. So remembering that I've already folded this in half, this is pocket K, it's already been folded in half with wrong sides together, sorry, so you're looking at the right side. And you want to line up the raw edge with the line that you've just drawn, and then pin that in place, and then we'll sew that on there. So it's all really just about layering up the pockets, and of course you can change the configuration of these pockets if you want. So once again, I can line up the edge of my presser foot with the edge of the fabric, raw edge of the fabric. And just as before, sew that pocket in place. So we're going to line that up, raw edges matching, everything looking facing the right way. And when you're lining up, just make sure that you know, you can see here that everything is parallel and even. If you keep it looking nice and even as you go, then you have a really nice finished look. All these layers together within the seam allowance. So when I say the seam allowance, you are going to be adding a binding all the way around the edge. So these stitches will eventually be covered up by the binding. So you just want to sew fairly nice and close to the edge. Further back up here. That's all now sewn together. So there's my my zip. We're going to work on this next. Now the zip is longer than the panel, so if I compare that just to show you, you'll see that the zip is a fair bit longer than the panel. This is intentional, and this is so that we can add a couple of little tabs to either end, which is what these pieces are for. This is piece L, like this, so you get a little bit of pink showing at either end of the zip, and then we trim off these ends. And I like doing this because it gives it a nice neat finish, but also These metal tabs, the metal staples that are at the beginning and end of the zip, it's quite nice to be able to cut them off because you don't want to try and put binding over the edge of them. I mean, you could, if you had a zip that was exactly the same length there, then of course the binding would just come here and here, which would be fine. But I think this way it just makes sure that you're not going to have that metal part in the way when you're doing this. So the first thing to do is we just want to make sure that this open-ended part of the dip doesn't splay open, the zip doesn't splay open. So I'm just going to go over to my machine and just do a couple of stitches back and forth across here, just to hold the zip ends together for the next stages. So I'm just holding them together there, and I'm just going to do a few stitches forward, holding the zip ends together, a couple of stitches back, and back again. So all I'm really doing is just holding that closed for the next part. Okay, so next we're going to add the zip tabs to the end. So take your zip tabs and you want to press and fold them in half lengthways with wrong sides together so that you're looking at the right sides. So once we've folded and pressed that in half, we're now going to attach it to the end of the zip here. So we want to keep that puller out of the way. And what we want to do now is just line up the edge of the tab with the end of the zip. Put a couple of pins in there to secure. And then I've got my fold there, my crease that I've just pressed. I'm going to sew through there at the same time, sort of sewing through the zip. You want to make sure that the zip teeth are kind of butted up next to each other if possible. There's a bit of a knack to it. You just want to sew through that fold that you pressed in your tab and through the teeth. Now your machine will quite happily sew through those nylon zip teeth. Then I'm going to go back again, make it nice and strong, and back forward again, just because the zip is going to be pushing up against that seam. There we go, so you can see that I've gone forward, back and forward over there, and then if I fold that back, my zip teeth are together there, and then I've got an attractive end to my zip there, which will just sit where my pocket is. So at this point I just like to come in here to the inside, and then I just trim that off to get rid of the metal staples. Don't worry that you're now trimming off this stitch that you did, that was just a holding stitch. So that's the end, that end of the zip now done. And it looks nice, and it's now nice and flat because you've only got the thickness of your cotton fabric there to worry about for when you come to do the binding later. And you can just trim that down if you want to neaten it off a little bit. And that's done. Now this is slightly wider than the zip tape, that's fine, that will all get concealed eventually. So now what we want to do is the other end. So we want this to end up being the same length. So here we go, that's there. So if I just line this up so that this edge here lines up here, and this is where you can kind of use any length zip, but this is a 30 centimetre zip I'm using. So I just pin that, and you don't need to do a holding stitch here because of course this area of the zip is closed. We had to do it this side because the zip puller would have gotten in the way if we left it done up, and then when you undo it this pulls apart. But here we don't have that problem because the zip teeth are closed. So I'm just going to come through here, stitch through here, and then I can fold that back, and then I've got my two zip ends. And back again. There we go, that's all done. There we go, so I just want to trim that off there. So I've gotten rid of that metal staple at the other end, and then I can just press that one back. Give it a little bit of a press. Don't want to get too much of a hot iron on my nylon teeth, and then there you go. So you've got a nice zip now that's exactly the right length. We've removed any metal bits that might get in the way of the binding, and you've got a nice decorative end to each zip. So the next stage now is actually to attach our zip to our pockets, and I want to do it this way round so that the zip puller is up here. This is going to be on the left hand side, and I want my puller to be at the top. So lay it down that way so the puller's this side. I'm going to undo that puller so it's out of the way. And then I'm just going to do this in 2 stages. So first of all, I'm going to sew, because I've got a few different layers going on, first of all I'm going to sew my zip to my pocket panel, and then I'm going to sandwich it with the other zip pocket panel. If you want to, you can just do this all in one go. If you've done a lot of zips in the past and you're quite confident, but I'll show you how to do it in 2 stages, because then it's a slightly, you can see what you're doing a bit better. But essentially what you're going to do is sandwich your zip between your pocket panel and your other zip pocket panel, and then that will fold back eventually whoop, 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 to look like that, and then that's what sits on your in your wallet. So it all makes sense, but first of all let's do this stage. So zip right side down onto your pocket panel. We're going to use our zip foot to stitch along there, and then I'll show you what's next. And then when you approach that puller, get a little bit closer, then I'm going to leave my needle down, lift my presser foot and wiggle that puller out of the way. And then I can carry on. I'll sew all the way to the end, do a back stitch, and that's the first layer of my zip done. So I'm just going to undo this a little bit. I'm now going to put these right sides together and line up the raw edges. Don't worry about the fact that the zip end is overlapping, that's absolutely not a problem. Actually, I might just use clips for this bit, mix it up a bit. There we go, so pop some clips in there. So I'm just sandwiching that zip between the 2 zip pocket panels. So those raw edges are matching, that zip's held in place, and like I say, you can do that in one go, but by doing it in 2 you've got less to think about because the zip is already secured to this panel. So pretty much the same technique again. So I'm having to sort of feel my way to make sure that I'm at the side of the zip tape there, and I can just feel with my finger that the zip tape is the zip teeth rather are just kind of posting underneath my zip foot. Now I can feel just here that there's my puller, so I'm going to lift that, reach inside in between the layers and move my puller up out of the way. And when you do this, make sure you take your foot off the pedal because you don't want to accidentally start sewing. So there we go, there's always a bit of extra lift on your presser foot lever there. You just need 3 pairs of hands. There we go, so we're going to carry on all the way. Back stitch, and I'm done. So we can now just give that a bit of a press. So you can see I want to just press my panels away from my zip. Start with that one, just press that away there, and then fold it round. I don't want that fabric getting caught up, so I'll just push that down, and then I can press this away as well on the front side. Okay, so now that's all pressed, I'll just do one last row of stitching to complete this this zip area. Let's just check that the zip works nicely. That's good. So my last lot of stitching is just going to be a top stitch through here, through all layers, to keep everything out of the way. So still keeping my zip foot on, but this time I'm going to switch it over to the other side because I'm going to come this way. Just find a reference point. So my reference point is going to be the edge of my zipper foot. I'm going to line up with this fold, and I'm just going to do a top stitch. Whoops, let's get rid of that thread. A top stitch through all layers. Now move that zip puller out of the way once more. Easier this time because I'm not sewing quite so close. So that panel is now complete. I can now add it to my wallet. So there's my main panel there. Let's move those bits out of the way. And I've got my passport pockets that I've already attached there. So these are now, these panels here with the zip, these are now going to get attached onto the other side. So we can just lay that down, matching up the raw edges as before. And then I'm just going to use clips because I've got quite a few layers to contend with. So you want to make sure everything is sitting nice and square and true. If your zip ends are kind of overlapping a bit there, you can just trim those down now at this stage so they're not in the way and they're not interfering with the fold. So we'll just line everything up. Put some clips on. So that's clipped. I'm just going to stitch around the edge to secure that. Just make sure that this is sitting nice and straight. There's my centre fold there that I pressed before, so I can see that it's definitely sitting to this side of it, which it should do. And I'm just going to stitch around the edges now. Okay, so let's just sew all pockets together within that sort of margin where we we'll have the binding covering everything up. Try as you sew, because you're going through a few layers, the presser foot will have a tendency to want to push everything down. So just kind of walk it in so it's not kind of going to end up skew. And if it does look like it's walking away, just lift the presser foot and push all the fabric back down, smooth it all down. I mean, if you want to, you can start at the bottom and sew to the top as well. I'm kind of going all the way around the edges. I'm just almost stitching on top of my previous lines of stitching here. It's going through quite a few layers, which is why it's best to have a medium weight needle, or even sort of medium to heavy weight needle when you get to this stage of going through these layers. There we go, back, and we're done. There we are, so they're all nicely sewn in place. Now what we're going to do is add a piece of binding to finish off this edge. Of course, at the moment, our zip pocket is completely open. So we're going to close that with a bit of binding. And this way, doing it this way, I find, just keeps everything sitting really, really flat, which is what you want for your wallet, rather than, you know, having a zip that's folded back on itself like that and then sits proud like this, which would kind of bulk things up a bit. I quite like it to do it in this method of construction so that it's all sitting flat. So then what I do is I just place the binding over the edge, and I think that this adds a really nice touch of colour, a nice, you know, marries it in with the binding that goes around the edge, so I really like how this looks. And then we're going to sew all the way down both edges of the binding to secure it. So I'll just pin that in place there. And, you know, you want to be nice and parallel to the zip, but you also, on the other side of your binding, you want to line up with the fold so that when this folds over, you know, because you don't want to be folding the binding in half, you can see that the fold is there and the binding is just against the fold. So it's not going to get in the way. If it was kind of straddling the fold, then your wallet won't fold in half very easily. So you can see that how by using the zipper foot, it's allowing you to get nice and close to the edge of that zip there. You can see how that's nice and close stitched in there. And then I want to do the same on the other side, so I can actually just put my everyday presser foot back on. So that's the both sides of the binding are now stitched down. I can now trim that down to meet the edges there. Trim off any thread tails at the same time, keep everything nice and tidy. There we go. And that's the entire pocket area of our make finished. All of the pockets are now in place. So we're now ready to do the outside part and finish it off with the binding.